He went out for a walk and never came back. What started as a normal spring day in a quiet Colorado town turned into a chilling mystery that would go unsolved for years. Joshua Maddux was 18 years old, full of life, talent, and ambition. No history of trouble, no warning signs of what was about to happen. Just a young man who vanished out of thin air. But years later, when the truth actually came out, it was something that no one could have imagined. This is the strange, very haunting case of Joshua Maddux. Story of loss, unanswered questions, and a twist that will leave you speechless. Welcome back to another Beauty and Crime Sunday with me, in which I do my skincare while I talk about the chilling cases I found this week. So without further ado, grab your skincare and let's actually start with the story. Let me tell you a story that starts in a very little mountain town and ends up in one of the weirdest, strangest mysteries you probably have never heard of. Joshua Maddux was born in March 1990 and grew up in the very scenic little town of Woodland Park. Picture this. A little town with very tall pines, winding trails, and a very tight-knit community. Josh lived there with his dad, Michael, and his brother Zachary, and his two sisters, Ruth and Kate. Josh wasn't really your average teenager. He was homeschooled from the very beginning, and later joined the Woodland Park High School, where he stood out obviously because he has been homeschooled from the beginning. But not just because he was very smart, but also for his creativity. This guy was an artist, a writer, and a guitarist. Pretty much a one-man band of talent. He obviously had great grades, a very sharp wit, and a very goofy sense of humor that his friends and family adored. His sisters even had a nickname for him called Dua because of his loving and very kind personality. But Josh's story took a very tragic turn in 2006 when his brother Zachary took his own life. It devastated the whole family, especially Josh. Still, he seemed to push forward however he could. A strong, quiet, but still the same kind-hearted soul that he was from the beginning. Then came May 8, 2008. Josh woke up one day, told his sister Kate he was heading out for a walk, and just like that, he just vanished. Now, going for a walk wasn't unusual for Joshua. He would usually, since he was very close to the forest, he would just go on walks through the forest. It was his way of, let's say, therapy. Sometimes he would wander by himself, but other times he would go with friends. But when he didn't come back that day or the next, they definitely thought it was not usual. Until 5 days passed. No sightings, no signs of Josh anywhere. And that's when his father called the police. I know, 5 days might be a little too much, but I don't know. This is a quote that the father actually gave the police. "I got up one morning and Josh was not there, and he just never came home. The next day, he still didn't come home. I called his friends, nobody had seen him. Nobody knows where he is." The community rallied, search teams scoured the forest, combed through trails, and checked every little corner they could. But weeks passed, then months. Still no signs of Josh. Eventually, hope turned into speculation. One of his sisters posted on Facebook holding on the idea that maybe he was still alive. That maybe he had just chosen to start a new life by himself. And she imagined that one day maybe Josh would just show up, maybe with a wife and kids, and maybe he would just bring them and show it to the new aunts and grandparents. After all, he was 18, he was legal, independent, and he could have left his own town because he wasn't happy there. He did have the brains and the talent to do that. Maybe he was out of town touring with a band, you never know. Maybe he was living out his wildest dreams of being just a writer in a touring band. Or maybe he was just living his brighter dream in a forest somewhere in a cabin. Everyone wanted to actually believe that he was still alive, because the alternative, it was too painful for them. Police did not suspect foul play. Josh wasn't in trouble. He was doing well, happy, grounded. So they simply filed a missing persons report. And the mystery of Joshua Maddux faded very quietly, at least for a while. But what happened to him next shocked everyone. 7 long years. 7 without knowing anything about Joshua. It remained a very haunted mystery of where is he? The case went cold, no new leads to know what happened to him, no clues, and his father, Mike Maddux, kept holding to the hope of maybe one day he will come back. So much that he actually kept the house that they lived in, just in case Joshua decided to come back one day and he would just walk through the front door. But obviously, he never did. But then, everything changed. August 12, 2005. Just another normal afternoon until a phone call to the police at 2:30 p.m. shattered silence in that little town. A demolition crew had made a very disturbing discovery. The call came from Meadowlark Lane in Woodland Park, just a mile from Joshua had lived. A construction company led by a 79-year-old man, Chuck Murphy, was tearing down a very old, long-backend cabin on one of the properties to make way for a new housing development. But as the crew started dismantling the whole cabin, the chimney the most important, they found something they would never forget: a human body crammed into 1 meter off the ground inside the chimney shaft, in the fetal position, naked from the waist down, one hand over his face, and the body was obviously very severely decomposed, but the thermal shirt he was wearing was still intact. But the positioning of the body suggested that he had been there for years, and it obviously had. After forensic testing, it was confirmed the remains belonged to Joshua Maddux. And let us sink in, Joshua was missing since 2008. The body was discovered in 2015, and all that time, his remains had been hidden inside a chimney in a cabin so close to his house that he could probably walk there in 15 minutes. But the story only gets weirder. Let's rewind for a second. The cabin, once owned by the Murphy family, had a very long and very colorful past. It used to be part of the Thunderhead Ranch, a wild place where gambling parties were the norm decades ago. But eventually it was passed down and rented until it became empty and forgotten. Chuck Murphy, who occasionally used the cabin just for storage, described the place as very filthy and overrun with animal droppings. He had no reason to actually go in the cabin except to tear it down. But what he remembered did not add up. Years before the demolition, he remembers that he did close the chimney. He put a very heavy steel reball to keep raccoons to go inside the chimney, or other smaller animals just to go for the chimney. According to him, there was no way a human being could have come down the chimney the way he had. He was adamant that kid did not come down from the top. So how did Joshua end up inside the chimney? According to the coroner, there were no drugs inside his system, no broken bones, no stab wounds, no gunshots. His death was ruled accidental, possibly caused by hypothermia after getting stuck in that chimney. But that explanation has very serious holes. First off, remember that Joshua was found naked from the waist down, with only one thermal shirt on him, his other clothes neatly placed inside the fireplace, in the very room the chimney leads to. So he was inside the cabin? How do you explain that? Also, Chuck Murphy noticed something else. A breakfast bar in the kitchen had been torn from the wall and placed in front of the fireplace, almost like someone had blocked the chimney from the inside. And if Josh went down the chimney head first because he was found looking down, he would have been trapped in a position that it's known for compressive asphyxia, because if you are the other way around, your body crushes its own lungs. But that doesn't really match the position he was found. So let's take a step back and ask the question that everyone is asking themselves right now. Was Joshua Maddux murdered? Because there is obviously more to this story. During the investigation, several anonymous tips were called in. One person claimed they heard someone say, "I put Josh in a hole." That tip was ignored. Years later, a Reddit user came forward with a very disturbing story. They wrote, "I went to high school with a skinny, dorky hippie named Andy. Played the guitar. One day, my friend Josh met up with him and then vanished." This Andy was later identified as Andrew Richard Newman. Andrew and Josh were around the same age at that point, and both were very into music. They went to the same high school, and so it's very likely they crossed paths, or even they were friends. But here is where it gets dark. In 2009, after Josh disappeared, Andrew Newman was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he befriended a man named James Lolito, interesting name, who was caring for a disabled person. And Newman asked to crash at their place, and Lolito agreed. The next day, Lolito came out of the shower to a very horrific scene. His disabled friend had been stabbed to death, and Andrew gone. Soon after, he was found trespassing in Texas with 2 children, both under 16. And when police took his fingerprints, they matched the fingerprints to the New Mexico crime scene. But somehow the case did not stick. Later, Newman admitted to a new murder, claimed he had killed a woman and stuffed her into a barrel in Taos, New Mexico, but because the police had another suspect in custody for that murder, they dropped Newman's case. And over the next decades, Newman would actually bounce between arrests in multiple states, including charges for assaulting police officers, robbery and trespassing in Texas, Florida, and Utah also. As for now, he's still in prison, serving time in Brazos County. He even made headlines in 2019 for attacking a detention officer while being behind bars. So here we are. Joshua Maddux was ruled an accident, but nothing of what I have told you seems like it was an actual accident, because who jumps into a chimney head first like it's a pool? I don't think so. And how do you explain the clothes being neatly on the fireplace? No explanation for that either. A body found in a sealed chimney, clothes folded neatly into the cabin. tips ignore completely. A man with a very violent past, directly linked into Joshua's social circle, roaming free for years? Is it all just a coincidence? Or an accident, I guess. Or was Joshua Maddux the victim of a hidden crime that never got the justice it deserved? You decide. So what is my theory on the Joshua Maddux case, you may ask? So Joshua leaves that morning. He tells his sister Kate that he's just gonna go for a walk and that he will come back later. That detail by itself tells us something very different. He was supposed to come back. He was thinking of coming back, but he never did. At some point of that day, whether by choice or force, Joshua enters the cabin. Once inside, something happens, something terrible. Was it a confrontation, an accident, or was he lured in? The autopsy ruled out the visible trauma. No stab wounds, no bullets, no gunshots, no fractures of any bones. But what could be ruled out was asphyxiation. That includes strangulation or being crushed as he might have been in a chimney. And then there is the strangest detail of all. Joshua was found only wearing the thermal shirt. His pants, underwear, socks, and shoes were gone. They weren't just discarded now, they were neatly folded by the fireplace. Whether that part was a bizarre ritual or an attempt to stage something, we will never know what happened. But here is the part that actually sticks with me. Joshua's body was not dropped from the chimney from the very top of the ceiling. The rebar and the middle thing that Chuck put on the chimney that made it impossible for that to happen. So someone, possibly his killer, put Joshua's body into the fireplace and shoved it up the chimney from the bottom. That's probably what happened. And then the kitchen breakfast bar was ripped out of the cabin and placed it in front of the fireplace, likely to block the smell or just to make sure that nobody would actually look up in there. And it did work for 7 years. Now let's look at who was in Joshua's life at that time. Who had the motive? Who had a history? Andrew Newman, a classmate, a musician, a known associate of Josh around the time of the disappearance. After Josh vanished, Andrew began racking up a very long sheet of trespassing, violent assaults, and allegedly even confessed murders. So, is it a stretch to say that he could maybe have been Joshua Maddux's killer? Maybe. But is it impossible? Absolutely not. The timeline does fit. The behavior aligns, but without evidence or concrete evidence. It's all just a theory, my theory. By the time that Joshua was found, obviously the crime scene was too far gone, and the cabin was being demolished, so any type of clue that they might have was gone. The chimney was torn down, and also Joshua's remains were cremated shortly after the discovery. So whatever secrets that place might have held, they went with it. So where does this leave us? We are left with a lot of questions. Loose threads, a tragedy buried in ambiguity, and a young man with such potential gone too soon in a way that just does not make sense. So the case of Joshua Maddux remains a mystery, one that haunts a quiet town in Colorado and anyone who dares to look up too closely. Thanks for sticking with me with this tragic and horrific story. The case of Joshua Maddux raises a lot of questions and leaves behind just very few answers. Was it a freak accident, a tragic mistake, or something far more sinister that was just buried, literally for years? I would love to hear what you think about the story. Do you think he was placed there? Do you think he put himself there? What do you think? So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you like stories like this and you love skincare also. And if you want more strange, unsolved and downright hunting true crime cases like this one, subscribe and just don't miss out my videos. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and like always, remember to do your skincare. And if you don't end up like a glazed donut at the end of it, you're not doing it right. Bye bye!